Right now, we're going to go out to an ABC News special report on this investigation into the driver that plowed into the crowd.
Pickup truck through a crowd on Bourbon Street, killing 10 people and injuring dozens. They say the driver then came out of the truck and opened fire on officers, injuring 2 before being shot and killed. The FBI says improvised devices were also discovered in and around the scene of the attack, and those devices are now being tested. The White House also says President Biden has been briefed on the attack and has been in touch with the mayor of New Orleans. I want to bring in our senior investigative correspondent, Aaron Katersky. Aaron, what's the latest of the timeline of how this all unfolded?
This was about 3:15 a.m. local time. There was still a crowd on Bourbon Street, a mix of tourists and local residents, when the white pickup truck turned from Canal Street onto Bourbon Street, was able to get around barriers meant to prevent a vehicle ramming attack, accelerated and very, very fast plowed into this crowd of pedestrians, killing at least 10, injuring roughly 3 dozen. Initially, police responded to the first call for an active shooter because there were gunshots. When the suspect exited the vehicle, he shot at responding New Orleans police officers. 2 officers were struck by gunfire, taken to the hospital in stable condition. In addition, improvised devices were found at the scene. The authorities have since tested them and determined that at least one of them appeared to be a viable device. So it adds a degree of complexity to this evolving situation. Right now, police are scanning the French Quarter using drones, cameras, and other technology to see if there are any additional possible devices. The ones they have found are currently being destroyed.
And I want to bring in our Chief Justice correspondent, Pier Thomas, because, Pierre, the big question when you think about a day like New Year's Eve, when you know Bourbon Street is going to be heaving full of people, is how does something like this happen? How does a truck even get close enough for this attack to unfold?
Well, the police superintendent said that the suspect was able to get around the barriers. Now, that is a flaw, obviously, that you cannot have in a situation like this. And, Diane, to emphasize what's going on here, the FBI has taken the lead in this case. They have now investigating this as an act of terrorism. That's official statement from the FBI. They are very concerned about the circumstances around this, the fact that the suspect had a weapon, the fact that they found at least one viable explosive device, that this was clearly an intentional act. I'm being told by multiple sources that they're looking at the possibility that the suspect may have come into the country recently. Again, very fluid situation. They're also looking at the potential for any kind of ties to ISIS. Again, it's very early in the investigation. Nothing has been finalized, but this is being treated as the highest priority right now. The Attorney General has been briefed. President of the United States has been briefed about this. The FBI director directly involved in this case as well. Again, so many people injured, at least 10 dead and 20 plus people injured. Again, law enforcement officials have been on a high alert really since October of 2023 after the attack, horrific attack in Israel. And the FBI director and his counterparts have been warning month after month that we are in a heightened environment where virtually every sector of terrorism was on fire, the potential for acts of violence. So this now codifies what we've seen from earlier this summer with 2 attacks on former President Trump, then candidate Trump. Now we have a situation where the FBI is looking at this as a potential act of terrorism. Resources are being flooded into that area. They are now trying to do a search, a background check on the gun. Where was the gun purchased? Any information they can find out about the vehicle. They're searching surveillance cameras to see if they can get a timeline in terms of how the vehicle moved through that particular area and through that particular crowd. But again, cold-blooded act of murder, law enforcement treating this with the highest priority.
And I want to bring in the former New Orleans Mayor, Mark Morial, for more. Mayor, thanks for joining us. What's your reaction, first of all, just to hearing that this happened the way that it happened on New Year's Eve in Bourbon Street?
I'm sickened by the entire incident. I am in great pain for the families of those who've lost people, for the 2 law enforcement officers who've been injured. What would compel someone to carry out such an act? And clearly, it seems as though he planned even more if they found explosive devices or potential explosive devices in his vehicle. This is an area of great festivity. The French Quarter is about a little bit less than 1 square mile. Bourbon Street, of course, the main street of bars and lounges and places where people go. And New Year's Eve and New Year's morning are perhaps one of the best places to be on New Year's Eve and New Year's morning. I think for the city and for the leadership of the city, the double challenge is to navigate this while at the same time ensuring that people will be safe today and tonight. There are literally hundreds of thousands of people in the city, including tens of thousands who are there for the Notre Dame, Georgia Sugar Bowl game, which is part of the college football playoff. And in a little bit over a month, New Orleans will host the Super Bowl. So I'm sure the leaders of the city, and I've been in touch with the mayor and the law enforcement community and the civic and business community, will want to do everything they can do to ensure the safety of those who are there who want to enjoy tonight's football game, and of course, in about a month, the Super Bowl. So they've got a lot to deal with, the investigation of the current incident, but ensuring that the next two big events can be carried out in a safe fashion.
And let's talk a little bit more about that, Mayor. One, how surprised are you? And what's your reaction just to the fact that this truck was able to make it onto Bourbon Street? We have at least one eyewitness saying that the normal big, powerful steel barricades weren't up and that they had sort of more flimsy plastic barricades. Again, just one eyewitness account, but that's what he's telling us. And do you think they can go forward with the Sugar Bowl tonight in these circumstances?
You must go forward with the Sugar Bowl, because the first thing that people who commit acts of terrorism want to do is intimidate people, bring about fear. We have to be strong and resolute. The adjustments to security need to be made and can be made. And I think why those barricades were not up, if they were not up, is going to be, I think, central to this investigation. A lot of investments have been made post 9/11 with respect to Bourbon Street to try to ensure that egress and ingress by vehicles is not easy. So there's a lot of answers, a lot of questions and a lot of answers that I think many of us want with respect to how this truck traversed from Canal Street, which is a street where traffic is allowed to flow, but the opening of the mouth, if you will, of the French Quarter is really at Bourbon and Canal. So that truck obviously took a right. The barriers are down about a block, usually at the corner of Iberville and Bourbon, and how that truck got into that area, I think we all want to know. Right now, I think we've got to keep our thoughts, and I think many of us on pins and needles, hoping that, want to know the identities of those who have lost their lives, the 28 to 30 people who are injured and are at the hospital, the 2 law enforcement. So this is a tragic event. I think it talks, walks, and smells like an act of terrorism. And I know that federal law enforcement is being cautious, investigating it that way, but it seems, it looks, it feels like someone that had a heinous motive to carry out a mass killing.
And the FBI now also says, as Pierre already pointed out, that they are also investigating this as an act of terror now. I want to bring Elizabeth Schulze at the White House, because we are told, Elizabeth, that the president has been briefed and he's already spoken to the current mayor of New Orleans. What else are you hearing from the White House?
Right, Diane. The president has been briefed. The White House says he will continue to be briefed throughout the day. He spoke with the mayor of New Orleans earlier this morning to offer his full support and the full resources of the federal government. The president expected to be in touch with senior FBI and Department of Homeland Security leadership throughout the day. We do know that the White House is calling this horrific news right now. The president says he will be right now continuing to talk to the FBI. The FBI is leading this investigation, Diane. As of now, the president this hour is scheduled to go from his home in Wilmington to Camp David. We are waiting to see if there'll be any updates to the official schedule to see if the president does make any further comments on this, Diane.
All right. Elizabeth, thank you. And Morgan Norwood has been speaking to eyewitnesses to this attack. Morgan, what are they telling you?
Well, witnesses, Diane, describe an absolutely chaotic scene, of course, unfolding around 3:15 this morning. Some witnesses saying that they took off running. I spoke with one right as we were going on the air for the special report shortly after after all of this unfolded, right after that initial press conference. And he told me that he took off running once he heard all of the commotion, hid out in a nearby bar or some sort of lounge. Also talked about hearing those gunshots. And initially he thought they were fireworks. And of course, you can just imagine how confusing that must have been in the middle of, a celebration for the new year. Here's what else he had to say.
So Bourbon Street, like he said, probably about 3:10 a.m. We were heading towards Canal, which is the way the truck was coming towards us. We ducked off into a nightclub because we weren't sure what was going on at the other end, and it looked like just nothing we wanted to see. So we just ducked off into a club. By the time we got in, 5 girls had ran in frantically and hid under chairs. So us knowing where we were, we ran upstairs to the balcony to make it less available if something was following inside. And what we witnessed was body after body mangled, just as far as you could see. We counted 10, and at least 6 were instantly, clearly deceased. And they were trying to get everybody just to stay inside, but everyone had just completely disappeared. Like, after these people ran over, I think we were the only ones outside on the balcony, and we took video just for the sheer shock. Like, you don't see stuff like that on city streets. Yeah. And just no one was helping them. Like, that was kind of the first crazy thought we had, is why is no one helping them? They wouldn't let us out. And obviously, like I told you, some were very clearly deceased, but others were yelling out. And it's a lot to process.
Yeah, and you can hear how difficult it was for him to process that, Diane, talking about the whole situation in graphic detail.